Hey everyone, welcome back. So last week, Grinding Gear Games revealed details for the next new league coming to Path of Exile 2. The last of the Druids will be launching in just a couple of days, coming this Friday. And this includes a bunch of new stuff. We're getting a new class, the Druid. It's an elemental caster who can shapeshift. There's the new league and corresponding mechanic where you're kind of building out your own dungeon layout. Brand new pinnacle boss goes along with that. We got a bunch of new skill and support gems. There's been some pretty big balance changes, hundreds of new passive nodes, item revamps, and more. Looks like it's going to be a pretty fun league. Like, I'm genuinely looking forward to trying out the new class. Legitimately seems awesome. I think the league mechanic looks interesting. Hopefully it's going to add some more variety and replayability once we finish the campaign and interludes and actually get into mapping. And there's also been a fair few nice quality of life improvements that I'm looking forward to just having improve the overall experience. So yeah, it's a new league, it's a new stuff, another excuse to play some PoE 2. Everyone's happy, right? Well, not necessarily. In fact, the initial reception to the league was a fair bit muted. In fact, I would almost say it was kind of leaning negative at first, like just initial response that I was seeing online as they were revealing everything. And really the biggest point of contention in people's eyes were, where are all of those massive endgame changes and overhauls that the developer said would be coming with this update? And the simple answer is, as we've learned in subsequent days, they're just not ready yet. GGG over time kind of increased the scope and scale of what they wanted to change and improvements they wanted to make to endgame. And they've just said that they need a little bit more time to get things right. And for that reason, we haven't gotten the big endgame overhaul. Now, there are some things that will be changing up the endgame mapping experience, some of those quality of life improvements, and again, there's the new league mechanic, which we will ideally be engaging with in the endgame process, but no big sweeping changes and massive content additions when it comes to endgame in particular. That's gonna have to wait, apparently, until the next big update a few months from now. And frankly, I'm kind of okay with it, even though there's been a bit of a pushback, and it would have been great to have that stuff here. They can take the time that they need to try to get it in a good position. And either way, with what is here in the new league, yeah, I'm looking forward to jumping back in and playing some more PoE 2. This is easily one of my most played games over the past 12 or so months, and I'm happy to keep playing more. And yeah, this is some neat looking stuff. So in today's video, I want to give you kind of a brief overview of all of the new stuff, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the community response discussion and some fun things in here as well. Okay, so let's first start off talking about all the new things coming in this update. So first and foremost, we got a new class. That's exciting. The Druid is the first strength and intellect hybrid class added to the game. It is both a human spell caster, but also a shapeshifter. So in the human form, you got a lot of nature-based magic. You'll be summoning up thunderstorms, tornadoes, volcanoes, and they are going to be introducing spell totems here as well, where you can bind spell casting to these totems that you place down, and then those totems cast those spells. This is a really nice addition. Should open up a lot of interesting builds and combo potential. Now, one thing they did note with the human form of the Druid is that a lot of these abilities will have longer durations, and then you can interact with them in the various forms. So yes, the Druid will be shapeshifting. This is done through the new talisman weapon type. It is the weapon itself that causes you to do the shapeshifting into one of three forms. There's bear form, who is kind of big and tanky. They build up rage and have these powerful attacks, roars, and can even stampede across the battlefield. Probably one of my favorite moves that they have. There's also the werewolf, fast and agile. They can summon up some wolf minion companions and have a lot of ice-based abilities. They also are tied to the moon, and there's a lot of cool lunar theming in some of these skills. Really slick looking stuff. And then finally, kind of out of left field, the third form for your Druid is a wyvern. You know, like a hybrid mini dragon. You can turn into a wyvern. I thought maybe a bird or something, or even like a beaver, but I was not expecting wyvern, to be honest with you. And frankly, it's pretty cool. This form seems to be a combination of different lightning-infused attacks as well as fire abilities. And yes, as being a winged creature, you can straight up fly and breathe fire down on your foes. Looks amazing, frankly. The Druid will be launching with 2 ascendancies to start. First, there is the Shaman. This focuses on combining the spellcasting side of the Druid with their animal forms. You've got the unique ability to apply rage to spells as well, and can also add bonus effects to runes and idols. And then the second ascendancy, Oracle, kind of lets you peer into the future. This is rather interesting. So you'll get these different visions of your character casting certain spells, or the bosses you're fighting being in a certain state and position, and you can then interact with those. So if you see a vision of your character casting, I don't know, like an ice ability, if you cast that same ice ability, you're going to get a damage boost on it. Kind of interesting. We'll have to see how this plays plays out mechanically. Also, as an oracle, this is really interesting. You have access to the unseen path. This opens up hundreds of new clusters of passives on the passive tree. Druid Oracle Ascendancy has hundreds of additional nodes that they have access to. Kind of bonkers. We'll have to see how this plays out. Okay, so that's the new class. Next up, we've got the new league. This is titled Fate of the Vol. Vale? I actually have never known how to pronounce it. I think it's Vol. So this introduces a new league mechanic. It's kind of build your own dungeon. Basically, I've been told it's a spin-off of PoE 1's incursion mode. So how this works is while you're playing the game, you're moving through the world, you're doing the campaign and all of that, you will occasionally come across these Vol beacons. Now, killing nearby enemies will then activate the beacon. Then you go along your way, do this several times, and eventually you will open up access to the ruins. Once inside the ruins, you're presented with a tablet, and from here, you're effectively asked to build your own dungeon layout. You're going to be given multiple room and hallway options, and you can place and configure them in whatever order you want. Ultimately, you're trying to make your way through the dungeon to the architect and the eventual final boss, but you can kind of do whatever you want here. Now, what's more interesting is there's going to be a lot of room synergies as you place certain bosses, various facilities, and different kind of modifier rooms that will then in turn ramp up the challenge of adjacent rooms, granting better rewards in the process. And this is all going to be pretty self-explanatory. In fact, anytime you click on a room type, it will highlight any nodes that have any sort of synergistic effect with it, and then you can put it in whatever one of those you like. Beyond getting some nice just loot drops in general, you're also going to have the option to double corrupt items. This is going to be like peak endgame items. You get a great item, you corrupt it, you get to get a roll, you corrupt it again, and either you destroy it or you get a even better roll. And then also they have this transcension device where you can replace one of your 4 limbs to get a stat boost with various effects, and these will last until you die. Kind of interesting. So you do all this stuff, you finish up your initial run, and then you're going to leave, and you'll have to repeat the process of going through the open world, activating more beacons, eventually doing that enough so that you re-enter the ruins, and then you place more rooms to continue where you left off and progress further throughout the dungeon. Ultimately, you want to keep progressing this, adding more and more rooms, getting closer and closer to the end. Eventually, you have to fight the architect, and then defeating the architect will wrap the whole thing up and culminating in a fight against the new pinnacle boss. So yeah, brand new content type to engage with, and ideally, this is going to be a lot of the kind of new stuff that we're getting access to beyond any quality of life changes and adjustments to the mapping process. Also, other new things, we got new skills, support gems, and passives, about 20 new skill gems in totals. These are going to be like primarily based around the primal and shape-shifting stuff. Now, do keep in mind, though, these can be used by any class, as is Path of Exile's thing. That's what they do. So for some of these skills, it is going to be required that you have the new talisman weapon equipped. Again, that's the thing that lets you shapeshift, and you can do that on any character that you play. Obviously, it'll be most synergistic with any of the current strength and intellect classes, because this is a strength and intellect tree and weapon. And yeah, and then other skills will just be gated by certain strength and intellect thresholds, which if you meet, you can then use said items. There's also over 30 new support gems to enhance existing skills, over 250 new passives nodes in the passive tree. Now, a lot of those are tied to the Oracle Ascendancy for the Druid, but nevertheless, there's additional clusters of nodes that have been added for everyone else, and there's now 11 new unique items on top of some adjustments and improvements they made to existing uniques. And then finally, I should mention that the Abyss from last league, the Abyss mechanic, that has been added into the base game, or as they refer to it, Abyss is now a core mechanic. So once you get to mapping, you're going to have map nodes that have Abyss as a mechanic on them, and with this, they've added Abyss to the Atlas tree, so this is now another endgame map mechanic that you can kind of specialize in if you really like it. So that's all of the new stuff, and next we've got a bunch of quality of life improvements. First up, tablet and waystone changes. They have removed a lot of the tedium when it comes to tablets and waystone crafting in the endgame. Specifically, desecration and instilling are no longer a thing when it comes to crafting and doing maps. Now, as a result of this, they have buffed tablet modifiers at the baseline, kind of enhancing their stats, making them more beefy. So instead of you having to go through that hefty crafting process over and over and over again, basics of this is there's going to be less time spent crafting in the mapping process and more time spent actually just running the maps. Enemy scaling, this is a pretty big one. So come endgame, we're no longer going to see the huge quantity of enemies as we push into the higher tiers of waystones, 15 plus. So what they've done is they've reduced the total number of enemies at the cap by roughly 40%, I believe was the number. And then with that, they've made them tougher. So they're going to have more health and deal more damage. And to go along with this, evidently they've bumped up the loot drops that we've gotten to the same degree. agree, by roughly 40%. So there will be, at the very high end of mapping in Path of Exile 2, we should be seeing fewer enemies that are tankier and harder hitting with the same amount of loot dropping as we would have got in the past when there were weaker enemies and more of them. We should be getting the same loot, but less enemies, and they're going to be harder to kill and deal more damage. This is a pretty divisive point. I think besides the changes or the lack of new endgame overhaul that people were hoping for, this is probably one of the most contentious things that the community is a little unsure of, because it's really hard to know how this is going to go. Now, I'm interested in trying this out. I've enjoyed the campaigning, running through the campaign and doing the interludes. I'll be interested to see how this plays out. There are some people concerned that fewer tankier enemies isn't going to be as fun as more enemies that die more quickly. I mean, it's subjective, and we're going to have to see how it plays out ultimately. And I think there's also going to be a difference of opinion from the people who jump into the league, level up, and do a little bit of mapping and then leave, versus the people who are just hardcore grinding it for 1 or 2 months straight. So again, we'll have to see how it pans out. Another big thing is improvements to optimization. They said they've done significant optimizations to CPU performance. These changes should both improve the speed of key operations and allow us to utilize more of our CPU cores. They said overall we should be getting at least a 25% boost in our frame rate and significantly less frame spikes when CPU bound. Now, it's not lost on me here that as they hand in hand with hey, we're going to have a lot better optimization, they also announced roughly 40% less monsters at the high end. There is some connection there, but they've done work to improve the baseline performance of the game. But it certainly doesn't hurt if they've cut the monster density at the high end by 40%. Our performance will be better when we're at the high end as a result of them spawning in less mobs and having less effects and less things for our spells to interact with and all of that. That's not the only thing that's leading to better performance from what I understand, but it definitely doesn't hurt that there's going to be less monsters on the maps now when we're running tier 15 or 16 maps or whatever. So yeah. Oh, here's something else that's really great. Visibility has been drastically improved if you got into kind of end game efficient mapping. Some of the best juiced maps required you to apply delirium fog to them, and it just kind of made everything look like crap. In fact, I remember last league, I did this for a few days. I was running as juiced as I could get, having the delirium fog to really beef up the rewards and everything and the difficulty, but I just hated how it looked. And it also was impacting my performance. So I was literally just playing less efficiently because I didn't want to deal with the delirium effect. I hated it that much that I was gimping my grinding, basically. Well, apparently they fixed it. They have tuned down the effect drastically, and also it will no longer kind of gray out the map. It kind of added like a grayscale effect, and it took away any of the vibrancy and interesting color palettes. That evidently is a lot better. So yeah, that's basically the TLDR of this update. Now, they did release all of the patch notes, and as always, it's a doozy, many pages long. With this, there's tons of balance changes and tweaks and all sorts of adjustments. If you're really looking for that sort of minutia and in-depth detail, I suggest checking out some of Rax's recent videos. He's done a really good job of going through, breaking that stuff down and making it a bit more digestible. Watched a couple of them, great vids, and just give me a good general idea. But I'm not going to sit here for 20 minutes and do what he did in his video, so just go check that out, really, frankly. That's the big thing, and as I mentioned, the initial response, I was watching it live, and I was checking out chat and everything, and I was keeping an eye on socials, and when I went over on Reddit, initially there was a lot of people that were like, what the hell, like, why, where's that end game overhaul? I can't believe they're not doing the end game. I can't believe they're reducing the number of enemies on the maps and giving us more loot as a result, and it just was overall kind of leaning negative. I think this league sounds fine. Now, it's not the most substantial league. This isn't like the most exciting league of PoE2 that they've released. Still think it seems like it's going to be interesting, fun. There's a new class to play. There's a brand new mechanic to check out. They've done these quality of life improvements. I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to spending more time with the league. Now, do I think if next league they announce all the big endgame changes and they have a whole bunch of new content and different varieties of stuff to engage with, will that be more exciting? Yeah, probably, but that doesn't make it, like, already as a baseline, I think PoE2 is fantastic, and they could just keep making it better over time. So I'm pretty happy to jump back in when there's new stuff to check out, and there's definitely plenty of new stuff to check out here, and I'm looking forward to giving it another go as a result. And I know I'm not the only one. This thread popped up where someone was basically saying that they couldn't believe people were disappointed. He said, like, hey, there's a new class, 2 new ascendancies, 20 new skills, 250 pass-through nodes, 30 plus new supports, 11 new uniques, 9 new lineage supports, delirium changes, a new league atlas tree, a whole new league mechanic with new crafting officers, new bosses, and a new pinnacle boss, rebounds and countless uniques, rebounds rebalancing of lineage gem, rebalancing 9 skills, rebalancing, rework of almost all the ascendancies. He's like, dude, what the hell? I can't believe people are pissed off. This is more content in this early access update than a bunch of games get after multiple updates. And I don't know how exactly accurate that necessarily is, but it's certainly not nothing, especially when you read it out in like bullet point fashion there. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'm definitely not the definitely not the only one. I will play the shit out of this. Yeah, me too, brother. No, I know what you're saying. The real thing is, though, I do understand the people who feel disappointed when they were expecting a big endgame overhaul and they didn't get it, right? And I don't think it helps that we're off the back of all of the last Epoch stuff where, they were promised they were never going to charge money for these future content updates, and then they end up coming out and saying they're going to be charging money for this future content update. I mean, really, I think people were a lot of the ARPG community was already had a bit of a sour taste in their mouth from that. People aren't too thrilled, apparently, about some of the recent announcements for the Diablo 4 League, although I haven't kept really close tabs of that. I think maybe just like this portion of people who are fans of the genre, they were primed and already sort of a little disappointed in some recent ARPG news. And so when this update comes out, although it seems a decent update and it seems like it's going to be a fun league to jump in and play around with, it's not exactly what they were hoping for. So I do understand kind of the disappointment that comes as a result of that. I do. But nevertheless, I am looking forward to it. I think this is another key point here. Also, 40% less pack size and 40% increased monster life. Anyone not interested in slower combat is going to bristle at that one. And this is sort of just an extension of this sort of almost identity crisis that PoE 2 has had, where they want to deliver this more slow, methodical, combat-based gameplay, and you get some of that with the start of a new league as you're leveling up new characters, especially if you're not playing any of these super overtuned builds or whatever. Like last league at the start, if you weren't starting with Deadeye, things were slower, but if you were starting with Deadeye, you were pretty zippy. Like you were burning through the maps and getting to endgame pretty quickly. So you have this slower, more methodical combat, and then it gets morphed as you continue to push up and the builds come online and you're running tier 15 maps, and especially if you're playing meta screen clearing builds, it gets progressively zippier and zippier, faster and faster, more and more screen clearing, and this is going to rein that in at least a little bit to a point. I guess it depends on how much overkill some of these top-end builds are doing. Is 40% more health really going to make a difference with these top-end builds, or are they just doing such excessive damage that it really doesn't matter, in which case they're just going to be running maps with fewer enemies on them? I should add, they have talked about in the future, not at this present moment, but in the future they will give players apparently the option to choose, probably something in the Atlas skill tree or whatever, where you can say, actually, I want more but weaker monsters instead of less but tankier monsters. There will be some sort of agency over that players will have, and that'll be interesting to see when that comes in as well, for sure. The Delirium improvements are probably one of the things I'm most excited for, and there's been so many hilarious memes about Delirium Fog. This was one of my favorite recently. Tom Scott chokes on Delirium Fog. It's pretty fantastic, dude. I love it. No exaggeration, it stopped me from playing most effectively last league. I hated the Delirium, what it did to the visuals of the game and or performance that much. I really hated it that much. Oh, and then on a final note here, interestingly enough, they talked about the 1.0 version of the game, or the official release. Looks like they are aiming pretty strongly for 2026. They're saying, hey, it's not going to take until 2027. We're really pushing to get this out. Now, on the flip side of that, I think they've also stated that they don't expect to have all of the classes in for the 1.0 release. But if they have the baseline content, if they have the new fully fleshed out end game, if they have all of the chapter acts for the campaign, eventually the interludes are going to go away and we're going to get the remaining chapters. I don't know. They can save a couple of classes or whatever for post-release. It's not that big of a deal. I suppose the only annoyance about that is the classes are directly tied to new weapons, which are tied to skill gems that we have access to. So yeah, we'll be missing a couple of baseline weapons for release, but we'll see what happens. Ultimately, though, when it comes down to it, this is hands down one of my favorite ARPGs of all time. It's definitely the one that I've played the most over the past 5 or 10 years, frankly, like 400 hours already, and that's sort of on the casual end of people in my sphere, content creators who talk about, even as infrequently as I do, people who play Path of Exile 2 play a lot of Path of Exile 2, and I think that alone is a testament to the quality of the game. Yeah, we still want more content. Yes, endgame need some improvements and tweaks. Yes, there's still more stuff for them to add, but already what's here is great, and I'm having a good time. I'm looking forward to jumping into this next league. People were a little disappointed that it wasn't quite what they were hoping, but ultimately still like the game and still looking forward to playing it. So I'll be doing some follow-up coverage, probably kind of recap how the first few days of the league went, some video next week on that. But that's all for today. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Let me know what you think below. What do you think about the new league? What do you think about the lack of the end game? What do you think about what we are getting? Let me know. Love to hear your thoughts. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you.